So this video is going to be broken up into two parts. The first part is going to be how to actually find the enemy on the map, figure out where they are. I'm going to explain how to do that. Then the second part is once you actually figure out where the enemy is, how to spot him once you get there. Alright, part one, actually figuring out where the enemy is. This is a big map. The maps on this game are huge, and you don't want to spend the whole game just trying to figure out where they're going to be. So, what you got to do is you got to be able to eliminate large portions of the map that you don't think anyone's going to be at or aren't relevant for anyone to be at. So what this effectively means is you're going to be playing a game of probabilities. There's a long list of things that will give you information that will help you put in to the little puzzle you have. That's, you're never going to have all the pieces, but you're going to have most of the pieces. You're going to have a lot of information to put pieces on that puzzle board that will give you your best guess, best educated guess of where the enemy team is. And if you do this correctly, you can get very close to what they actually are going to look like on the other team, where the most of them are, right? And you're going to be able to use this to best position yourself, to best plan attacks, best plan defenses, to best go out and find the enemy and kill him. So I have a list of 12 tells that will help you figure out where the enemy is most likely going to be. Number one, the map layout. So for example, we've got Utah here. You can immediately say, okay, well, nobody's obviously going to be in the gray zones or the water. That's not going to happen, right? And after a few games, most people will stop running into the open fields. So there's going to be a lot less people in the open fields. So most people are going to learn to stick to cover. So all of these little clusters of buildings popped throughout the map, mostly along that center road. That's where people are going to conjugate. That's where your largest cluster of enemies are going to be. I can go over the entire map. It would take forever. That's probably going to have to be its own video. But basically, you can just narrow it down to people are going to be in clusters of cover or moving in between them in a very direct line. Most people don't do deep flanks, and if they do, they're going to be doing the same thing, just at a different angle. They're going to be going from cluster of cover to cluster of cover. So in these open fields, people are probably going to be going straight from like cluster of cover to cluster of cover. So you're basically going to have a lot of like little dots of people, and then sometimes little strings of movement between them. Number two, point position. Okay, zooming in a bit onto specifically the chapel on Utah. Here I have put in green all the decent amounts of cover around the chapel that I was talking about, those clusters, right? The rest of this is open fields with a few hedgerows in it. So the rest of this map is very open. And this green is everything that is practically usable and not, you won't be seen from half the map away just in an open field. You won't get caught out in this area. These are the safest places to move. Okay, so now let's say that you're America and you're defending the chapel. Enemy can realistically come from 4 directions, all 4. North, south, west, east. But they're probably going to have to stick to cover to do it. So they're going to either have to come from the road to the north, the road to the south, the creek to the east, or the creek to the west. The farther back you get along the roads or creeks, the more likely places their spawns are where they're actually coming from. But they're going to have to come up that, or they're going to be moving through the open field and they're just easy to pick off. Number 3, your team layout. So if you look at the 4 advancing points of where you think the enemies kind of come from, and you see that in the blue here, your team is mostly laid out in those 2 spots. You know that the roads are probably good. You probably don't need to worry about the roads. It's the creek you have to worry about. So to make sure the enemy doesn't use the creek to get into the chapel, you send a squad mate, a blueberry, to go east and one to go west in the creek. And then suddenly the one in the west dies. Okay, so now you know that there's people pushing from the west up the creek to try to get into the chapel because you just lost somebody over there. Number 4, hot/clear spawns. Okay, so instead of having teammates, you could also have spawns around the point. So say there's this yellow mark is a Gary on point. You also have a Gary West, you have a Gary North, and you have a Gary South, all these yellow dots here. And then suddenly the Gary to the south goes red, and then it dies. Well, you know enemies are coming from the south because they just killed a spawn point down that way. Or it could just stay red and you know that there's enemies coming from that direction. They just haven't seen the spawn and are bypassing it. But you still know that there are people down there coming towards the chapel because the Gary is red. Either it's locked out or it's just hot, which means there's people near it. So you can tell that there's obviously people there. It's a tell. It's showing you where they are. Number 5, call outs. Very simple. If you're in the chapel and you hear people say, hey, I see people south around this building here, then there's probably people south around that building there. Number 6, marks. It's about the same thing as callouts, except if it's the squad leader or your commander or other squad leaders, if you're a squad leader marking people up north around this area here, then obviously there's probably people up there if everybody's saying that. Just different, it's visual instead of vocal. Number 7, recon. If you're a squad leader, you're a part of a tank crew, you're support, or you're a recon squad sniper or spotter, and a recon plane goes over or a recon flare goes up, in which case everyone can see that, and you start seeing a fuck ton of dots, like just little red dots coming along in the rear, then obviously you can tell that there's people trying to flank the back of the chapel. You see all those little fucking red dots of people. You see a triangle dot, which will look kind of like this, but way smaller. That's going to be a tank. If it's got a hole in the center, then it's going to be a vehicle, like a transport truck or a supply truck. Number 8, jobs/roles. Okay, zooming back out, looking at the entire map. Certain people are doing certain things, like for example, with jobs and roles, there's going to be artillery. So there's artillery on the map in both sides for US and Germany. If you want to know where people are and you can hear arty or you can see it land and you're getting hit by arty, people are going to be in one of these 2 circles on the arty guns shooting into the map. So if someone's doing arty, it's very easy to find them. The guns are always in the same spot. Number 9, enemies that you hear. Okay, so this one's pretty simple. It's basically if you can hear footsteps around you, you can hear vehicles that aren't yours. You can look on the map and see if there's a vehicle, right? Or if you hear gunshots that are from enemy weapons, all the weapons sound differently. If you're on America and you hear an MG42, you can obviously tell, hey, there's Germans in the direction of that MG fire. Number 10, enemies that you see. This one's self-explanatory. There's enemies over there. There's enemies over there. Believe your eyes. But usually if there's one person and you see them, there's more than likely others that you don't see that are just hiding behind cover. Number 11, ant trails. Ant trails are basically the phenomenon that most people will run directly from their spawn point to whatever the objective that they're trying to get to, either it be the cap zone or some cover. But you're going to see people basically running in 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, just in a straight line, straight from their OP or Gary. So if you look where they're running from and you just point in the direction that they ran and just run that direction, you're more than likely going to find a spawn. Number 12, known enemy spawn points. And last point, shouldn't have to say it, but just in case you need to hear it, if you see an enemy spawn, obviously people are spawning there. That's where they're going to be. Very easy. Nice, easy kills for you right there on the spawn. Although you would rather kill it than let them spawn on it. But it's up to you. Okay, so to recap, the 12 tells or information that you're mainly going to be using to figure out where people are, or map cover slash layout, point position, teammates slash position slash death, hot slash clear spawns, callouts, marks, recons, jobs slash roles, people you hear, people you see, ant trails, and known spawn points. Now on to part 2. Once you have found the enemy, how do you see him? Part 2 is going to be a lot easier because it's much simpler. It's basically just learning the shapes and just knowing what to look for, just getting used to it, right? And there's only really 6 things that you have to get used to seeing for part 2, just to look for it. Silhouettes, muzzle flash, color changes, helmets, movement, and face slash skin. I want to give examples of all of these real quick. So the silhouettes, people aren't always going to just be right in your face like this. They're not always just going to give you the kill. So usually you're going to have to look for something more in the distance where it's just a man over here cresting at the bridge in this case. But sometimes a person blends in so well you don't see a silhouette or anything. So you have to go off of muzzle flash to figure out where somebody is to see them. Another big tell is a color change. Like, for example, you see the guy way out there. After we were prone, I couldn't really see where he went because of the recoil. But if you look, he's got that little fucking tiny silhouette that's not really silhouette, but it's a splotch of much darker on green. So that's what I'm shooting at, is just the fact that there's a color that doesn't match the rest of the environment. Helmets are a good giveaway too. There's nothing really with that distinctive round shape out there. I know it's obvious, but also obviously movement. I whiff a lot here. This is bad gameplay, but I only saw him because he was running around, and eventually I got him. The bunny hopping didn't save him.
Good shit.
And the last really big thing is the face. Faces give you away. If you blend in and everything, you're not skylining, nothing, you're not shooting, you're doing everything right except for one thing. Your face will show because there's going to be a pink dot out there for somebody to shoot. All right, that's it for me. I hope you're able to find people a lot easier, and this helps you get a lot more kills. I'm going to be working on some more guides here soon, and I can see in your window.